headphones. All right. Hello, world. Welcome, programmers. Welcome, music lovers. Welcome to Code and Coda. We are streaming live from Boston, Massachusetts this evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Joseph Parzell. I'm your host this evening. I'm a software developer and an app publisher. On guitar this evening, as always, our good friend Eric Gaudette. Well, you know what today's episode is. Today is the season finale of season 1. Eric has decorated nicely for the event. In case you haven't seen this yet, here's our season 1 abstract. We are on episode number 8. The season finale. Yay. Our technical specification for today's episode. Here it is. We'll have a quick introduction to Code and Coda, as always. A couple current events going on. We will do a season 1 recap. Have a few fun slides to take a look at. And also, we will complete a 5-minute recap of 2 weeks ago, our episode 7. Before we continue on with today's episode and basically clean up our code from last time, if you remember, we implemented a getTeams function that accesses data from Microsoft Graph. Well, that code needs to be cleaned up a little bit, so we'll work on that today. And after that, we'll go ahead and create another custom intent for our Alexa skill. This custom intent will allow us to get messages, and then we will respond with the latest messages that we retrieve using Microsoft Graph. Something new for today's episode. If you were on the codeandcoda.com website, usually there's just a link to the video. Today we have a link to a Teams meeting, which is not open yet. Sorry, I'll probably go ahead and jump in and open that soon. But that won't be used until later on in the show. What I hope to do is maybe take a couple calls from some of the viewers. And after this episode's Coda, if I can get a few viewers to stay late, we'll try and get Eric to perform an encore, which we haven't tried yet. Maybe we can do that later on in the episode. Don't forget, YouTube chat is open. I already see a few people in the chat room. So come in and say hi through the YouTube chat. And also, for today's episode, since it is the season finale, we will be having a little bit of fun. And what that means is we will have a few pop quizzes during today's episode. So that means be ready for a pop quiz. They can happen at any time, like right now. Let's check it out. If you want to answer this first warm-up pop quiz, go ahead and jump into the YouTube chat. First person that can answer this question correctly will get 1 point. So, I hope you are ready. Here is the first pop quiz question. On what day did Coda and Coda first go on the air? So if you would like to answer that question, first one to answer gets 1 point. Go ahead to YouTube chat and submit your answer. After all of the pop quizzes today, I'll tally up the results. First place winner will receive a $10 Starbucks gift card. I recently received a $10 Starbucks gift card myself. Used it just the other day. Second place, runner-up, will receive a $5 Starbucks gift card as well. Go get yourself a nice iced latte in the middle of the summer. Some current events going on these days. Don't forget we have Granite State Code Review Nightly. That's every weeknight at 9 p.m. Hosted by Jim Wilcox. Also, save the date, November 14th. That's the date for Granite State Code Camp. Just now getting started with that. Tonight's baseball game, Boston is at New York right now. So thanks for tuning in, all you Boston and New York fans. We know you couldn't miss the season finale. And look out, tomorrow is a full moon right around noontime. You've seen these slides before, the introduction Why Code and Coda. This was a Teams Thursday New England presentation. And I took my slides, asked Eric if he would play music behind the slides, make it a little bit more interesting. It's actually been a lot more interesting because Eric is amazing at guitar. One of my favorite quotes about Code and Coda here from our friend Jim Wilcox, the Granite State hacker. And I thought it'd be a little bit fun to see what the world would be like without Code and Coda. So first of all, why don't we just go ahead and make this black and white, and we'll turn Eric down. This is Code and Coda without Eric. We gotta have it. Too good. Why don't we check in on Eric and see how he is? Well, it looks like we only have one answer here. Jim, you're close. You're a little early, though. I'm going to go ahead and spoil it here. The first episode of Code and Coda was Sunday, May the 31st. Nice try, Jim. Nobody gets points for that one. Hopefully we'll get a few more participants during the next pop quiz. Okie doke, how about a Season 1 recap? Let's check it out. These slides were a lot of fun to make. So after looking back and seeing how the first 7 episodes of Code and Coda went, I realized that people are watching from a various amount of states in the country. Of course, from Massachusetts, where we are broadcasting live. We have a great group of people watching from New Hampshire, the Granite State, and some other friends and family joining us around the country. If you don't see your state on this list, let me know, and I will make sure to add it to the collection. We thank you for joining us wherever you are joining us from. Here's a slide I came up with. How are people watching? Some examples of the diverse audience that we have here at Code and Coda. Maybe you find your row in this table. I am Joseph, your host, watching Eric from Code and Coda Studios drinking strong coffee. Cheers. No matter how you watch, we hope you're enjoying the music and enjoying the slides. Remember when we started this season, we had on the schedule only 5 episodes, but we had to add a few extra episodes. And I've been mentioning that Code and Coda is an agile development process, so I stole some definition from Wikipedia. We had a create episode at the beginning, 3 2-part episodes, and now today's finale makes 8 episodes. We started on Microsoft Teams. Familiar, easy to use, but unfortunately the quality of audio and video was not what we were looking for, so we switched to a StreamYard and Teams configuration. And I don't know if anybody noticed, but we did lose the sync between the audio and video in the last episode. So today we are doing StreamYard only. I think it sounds great. Some of you may be wondering why it says episode 1000. Well, I promise it says episode 8, but it's written in binary. Every day we use base 10 numbers, but for the season numbers for Code and Coda, we're using base 16, and for episode numbers we're using base 2. I came up with a little chart here just to show you some examples of base 10 numbers compared with binary numbers, hex numbers, and just to show you a little bit of fun here, we have base 64 numbers as well. I call them numbers, but they do include the letters. Some of those base 16 and base 64 representation include some letters here. Now if we look at the first few rows here, we'll see Season 1 and Episode 8, how those are represented with binary numbers. Episode 8 there is 1000 in binary. There's Season 1, 0 by 01. Sometimes we use the 0x as a prefix just so that we know we're dealing with a hex value here, because once you start getting down to these rows higher up in the number, you can see we're starting to use the letters. If you've ever used web colors, you'll probably be familiar with hex representation. And we can go all the way up to the number 63 in a base 64 representation of a number. Still only be using one character, which is the slash. You can see the valid characters for base 64 here in order. I thought it might be fun to see what some other larger numbers looked like. So here's a table with some numbers. 2020, the current year. 6,800. That is the number of years until Comet Neowise comes back. Unfortunately, I missed seeing that comet. I hope somebody out there got to see it. 24,000. It's the number of miles around the Earth. 4 billion. That's the number of positive integers available when you have a 16-bit number. So you can see right here, 16 bits, 4 billion, how that's represented in hex and base 64. 7.5 billion, well, that's the number of years away until our sun turns into a red giant. It's a long time away. That's what these numbers look like. And then for 32 bits, we get, I think that's 18 quadrillion, but I'm not sure. I don't even know. There's 32 ones. Let's do one more slide. In base 10, if we have 10 to the 100, I think some of you out there might know what number I'm referring to here. That's a 1 with 100 zeros after it. Well, you would need 333 bits to represent that number. And we added a few extra padding at the front, because most of the time these are represented as bytes. 84 characters is what you need to represent that 10 to the 100 number with hex. And only 56 characters is needed to represent that number using base 64. I used the calculator on convertxy.com for this. So if we were to use the hex value, if we ever make it to season 10 to the 100, this is what the Code and Coda poster would look like. I don't know if we'll get that far, but hey, we'll keep on going here. let's try another pop quiz. Number 2. In that last slide, 10 to the 100 is known as a Google. Now, when we refer to Google, we refer to the verb Google, which is spelled Google. So the first one to answer correctly what the spelling of the noun Google is, go ahead and submit your answer into the YouTube chat. Good luck. We'll take one more quick break. Alright, I hope you enjoyed those first few slides and the introduction to Code and Coda. We are about to do our 5-minute recap of last episode. Before we do so, I suggest you mute your Alexa device. And also noticed in the chat, we have some viewers from Maine, the state of Maine, so New England representing. Thanks for joining us. Alexa, how are you this evening?
I don't like to brag, 'cause that's not my bag. But I continue to slay at telling the joke of the day.
Well, okay. Alexa, what's the joke of the day?
Where do elephants go to study painting? Tuscany.
Okay. The jokes get better and better every week, folks. Alright, well, we need Alexa here because what we're going to be doing is running through last week's slides in 5 minutes or less. We'll have Alexa give us a countdown timer. Remember the last episode? We took a quick peek at some code enhancements that I made, including updating the get greeting function so that a better greeting was sent back to the user. I also went through the process of consenting to the scopes using your Alexa app on your phone. And we went back into our web application to create a code block, which was a switch statement. That way, depending on which intent was requested, the switch would act a certain way. So, let's go ahead and take a look at those slides. We'll try and get through all of those in less than 5 minutes. How about we get a quick score update for our baseball fans out there first? Alexa, what's the score of the Red Sox game?
The Red Sox are beating the Yankees 7-6 at the top of the 8th. Kevin Plawetsky is currently at bat for the Boston Red Sox.
Alright, thank you. Well, Alexa, set timer 5 minutes, please.
5 minutes, starting now.
Alright, here we go. We're going to start our recap. We got 5 minutes, and like I was saying, we're going to consent to some graph scopes, so we need to log in Office 365, which gives us an access token to use with our web application. So we started off on our developer console here. Just kind of went back and showed you we have a get teams intent here that we are working with. Those are the utterances that you can say to fire that intent. And after you say get teams, remember that we are sending an access token to our web application. Well, this access token is the access token that we use to access Amazon information, but we want the access token that allows us to access information from Microsoft Graph. Before we get to that, here is the get time zone function that I implemented and the get greeting function that was implemented so that we return a nice customized greeting. You can see when you ask Alexa what time it is. Sorry, Alexa.
It's 9:56 p.m.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Alexa gives a customized greeting. She knows what time zone I'm in, so she can say have a good night. Well, that's what we're doing with Code and Coda now. When you say Code and Coda, it says good afternoon. That was a slide that was taken during the afternoon. We also went through and looked at the account linking values, such as the redirect URL to get the login information from Microsoft. Before we looked at the Alexa app on our phone, we went in and added some custom icons to our skill so that we could identify the skill a little bit easier in our Alexa app. Here we are about to log into Office 365 in our Alexa app. Now you're looking at some screenshots of an Alexa app that just got updated, so this may look a little bit different than how the app looks now. We navigated through to our skills, clicked on the Alexa skill app and clicked on settings, which allowed us to click on the link account button. The Alexa skill tells us which scopes we need to consent to, and when I tried to do that, unfortunately it failed, and that was because I did not put one extra piece of information on our application in Azure. What was that information? Well, there are Alexa redirect URLs that are here that need to be added to your web application. So you come back to the Azure portal, click on the authentication navigation item, and then click on add platform. We're going to be adding a web platform, and we're going to add those 3 URLs to our web application so that our application knows where to go after it's done authenticating. Since I needed to reconsent, I came to the My Applications section of Office to revoke permissions and then went back in to successfully consent to those permissions. And now you can see that when we run the skill in our developer console, we now get 2 access tokens. One is for Microsoft Graph, which you see on line 21, and the other is for Amazon API, which is on line 28. To get that access token, we modified our C# a little bit, added a global variable for the access token, parsed through the JSON. Remember that the intent information that we get includes a name of the intent, so we know if the help intent is fired or the get teams intent is fired. Created a get teams function, and within this get teams function, we start using the Microsoft Graph API endpoints, which you can see here. And after adding the Microsoft Graph information, which includes the access token and the URL, the endpoint for joined teams, we run our web application in the get mode so that we can debug it. We've added another button here so that we can run intent requests. Alexa, stop timer. And once we call that, we see that we get a list of teams back there is the Code and Coda team. That is where we left off last time. Today we're going to go ahead and clean up that code a little bit so that instead of getting an unorganized list of teams in return, we'll go ahead and put that in order. It looks like Marie is our first winner of the Pop Quiz Challenge. Jim, you were close. But there is the correct spelling of the noun of the word Google, so congratulations, Marie. Is currently in the lead with 1 point. Well, why don't we go ahead and fire up another pop quiz? We have 2 points available for this pop quiz. I hope you are ready. You can answer through the YouTube chat. So without further ado, here is a 2-part pop quiz. Which episode of Season 1 was the longest episode, and how long was it? We'll get back and start on Part 1 of the season finale and clean up our code. Let's take another quick peek back at Eric before we do that. Okay, here we go. First part of this episode. We're gonna clean up our code a little bit. As I mentioned, we will sort that list of teams that we get back from Microsoft Graph. And make it a little bit more nicely formatted. Remember that we are working on the Get Teams custom intent. So what happens is you come to your testing console and you can type in the skill invocation, which is Code and Coda. After you type in Code and Coda, you type in an utterance. One of those utterances is Get Teams. But when we type that in now, this is the response we get. That's because we haven't cleaned up our code. Right now we're just responding with the raw data that Microsoft Graph sends back to us. So why don't we go ahead back to our web application. Fix it up a little bit. Here's one of the switch statements we created. It's a switch within a switch. Why don't we go ahead and just take one step back. The initial switch statement here, what it does is determines if we have a launch request or an intent request. And if it's an intent request, remember the intent is something like the word help, or in our case we have a custom intent called get teams. We get that information from our JSON elements here, parsing through that JSON data, drilling down until we get to that information. Once we find that intent name, I'd like to make a note that sometimes when you are doing string comparisons, it is wise to first change that to a lowercase before doing those comparisons. And our comparisons here are the Amazon default help intent and also our custom intent called get teams. So what happens when we call our custom intent get teams? It calls a function called get teams, which we've seen already. And right now you can see that what we are returning is just a string which will be added to the response that gets sent back to Alexa. But that string has a little bit too much information in it, and it's not sorted, not formatted correctly, so what can we do? Well, in most cases, what you would like to do is add some parameters to your query string when you send your API request to Microsoft Graph. Sometimes they don't work. In this case, the order by parameter does not work for the joined teams endpoint. So we'll just go ahead and order the teams ourselves. Here are some of the updates that I've made. Let me get these line numbers in here. First thing is, on line 140, you can see that's where we initially get the content back from Microsoft Graph, running that method called read as string async. That's what's returning all of the data back to a variable. Within that variable, we can sort of parse through the data and organize it, collect it how we like. So the code that I've added on line 142, I've added another variable there, and in .NET Core we have use of the JSON document object. We'll use that parse method like we have already before. Parse that content into a new JSON document object. On line 143, you can see that we're getting the object within the object here. So in the parsed object, we're getting a property called value. That value is actually returned as an array. So what we can do is run one more method called enumerate array and give us one last variable called enumerated array. Alright. Once we have our enumerated array, we can run through that list of teams. So we're running a for each loop here. For each item within that array, what we're doing is getting the property called display name and adding it to a list that we've created. This is a list of strings. And once we navigate through each item in the enumerated array, add the display name to the list of strings, then on line 152, just like that, we can run one simple command on our list called sort. Once the list is sorted, what we would like to do is add a prefix to the team name. The prefix is just going to be the words team number and then the number of the team. So now that it's sorted, we can run one more for loop, go through the list of items that is now sorted. Just going to add a little bit of a prefix there. Since we've added a significant amount of code, why don't we go ahead and run this. I'm going to set a breakpoint here so you can see what the list looks like before and after the sort. So let's go ahead and run our solution. When I hover over the variable, the list, as we are stopped on this breakpoint, you can see that the list contains 9 items. They are not in order. Just like that, it's magic. The sort method on the list has placed the teams in order, and now you can see each team has our prefix there. Team number 1 through team number 9. Nicely formatted and in order. But we can't return a list. What we need to return is a string. So one more line of code ought to do it. You could see line 159, I've added one more line of code. It's a pretty nifty method here. It's a string method called join. So basically, you can pass the list into this method, and you also pass in the character, which is a comma. Once you do that, you can see that the return string now contains each of our 9 teams with the prefix. This string is what we are sending back to our switch code block, which is added to our speak variable. When I hover over the speak variable, I'm now breaking right here on line 95. Our speak item, our speak object string now contains that value, so when we send it back to Alexa. It's nicely formatted. Looks like we have a couple of answers here. I think one of you is right. Remember, the question was, which was the longest episode so far this season and how long was it? Well, if you go to YouTube and you search for MetroShare, that's MetroShare Solutions, you can subscribe to the channel and you'll see all of the previous episodes from this season. If I scroll over to the right, you will see that the longest episode was episode number 2. And it was an hour and 28 minutes long. So our winner for this question is Jim Wilcox. Nice job, Jim. Let's try another question. This question, 6 points are up for grabs. I don't remember if there are any more questions after this, so if you haven't answered, you may want to get in on this. If everybody is ready, something you may have noticed is we like to wear music shirts during the show. If you have a keen eye, you may have seen which band t-shirts have been worn during the show. There are 6 different answers for that one. We'll see who gets that. And we'll also go ahead and complete part 2 of this episode. Let's take one quick peek back in at Eric. Alright, part 2 won't take too long. We are starting to run a little bit long here. I don't want to keep you all night, because I do want to try and do some Teams chat. So, for part 2 here, all we'll be doing is creating another custom intent. Back on the developer console, we go ahead and click on Add Intent. This intent will be for getting messages, so let's call it Get Messages. And the utterances can start off with the first obvious, Get Messages, add a few more. Here are the utterances I've added as an example. So what that means is if the user says any of those things, the Get Messages intent will be fired off. Here I am after the invocation phrase and after the intent is typed in here to our testing console, you can see that in the JSON request that Alexa sends to our web application, it is sending an intent with the name get messages. I don't think anybody will be able to answer that last question. Somebody jumped right in and got the two obvious ones right off the bat. If you're going back to look through the previous episodes, you're a little too slow. Bob is our winner for that one. Looks like we have a tie for first place right now between Jim and Bob. And Marie is in third place. Thank you for participating. We'll go ahead and get started with part 3 in just 1 second. You know, I was afraid this might happen. We may have to skip the Teams meeting for this episode. It's already getting pretty late. So why don't I go ahead and finish up this last part, and then we can go ahead and get cranking with the Coda. So my apologies. I really was hoping to do some extra things during today's episode, but don't want to stay all night here. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the last section here. We are going to return messages from our web application. And that means we will be using the 2 graph endpoints that you see here. We're going to use the Teams/channels endpoint, and we're also going to use Teams/channels/messages. Now, I'm going to cheat so I don't have to write as much code. The way that I'm going to cheat is I have used Microsoft Graph Explorer to get the team ID and the channel ID in advance. Just don't have enough time to go through it all. But this is actually real easy. What we're going to be doing is just duplicating some code. In our switch code block here, we have a get teams case statement. So if I highlight that part of the switch statement, and then I press the command Control D, that is duplicate. And after I press Control D, you can see that the switch case statement is duplicated. All I need to do is go ahead and change a couple things. What we're looking for with this case statement is the get messages intent. And if the get messages intent is fired off, then we will call a function called getMessages. Since that does not exist yet, we can use our IntelliSense to get cranking on that one. It creates a new function for us. The other way to do it is to use the duplicate method again. Here is our getTeams function that we've already put into use. I'm highlighting all of the code for the getTeams function, pressing Control D to duplicate that code because we will reuse most of it. And I'm changing the name of the method to getMessages. Now, keep in mind that this is sort of the quick and dirty way to do it. You probably would want to create global variables for some of this information. Try not to have duplicate code. In this case, to get the getMessages function running, I've added two variables here at the top called Team ID and Channel ID. Again, I got those values by using Microsoft Graph Explorer, and that is the Team ID for Code and Coda, the Code and Coda team site that Eric and I use, and the Channel ID, which is for the general channel of the Code and Coda team site. On line 180, I changed the URL and here is the URL that gets you the messages from Microsoft Graph. So we have teams/teamid/channels/channel ID/messages. And all of that data pretty much comes back the same way. We'll create a breakpoint here and see what we get back in just a second. But keep in mind, when you're using this technology, did I mention that we also need to change the base address of the Graph client HTTP client object here? We are now switching from using v1.0 of Microsoft Graph to beta. We're using the beta URL here for getting messages. That's because this technology is still in beta mode. What that means is some functionality is not available, may not be ready for production use. The parameters that you would usually use with OData, such as select and order by, are not available for this. Also keep in mind that the scopes change occasionally. At the beginning of this season, the scopes that were mentioned, such as groups.read.all, require admin consent. Well, they've added some new scopes that allow you to do some same things that don't require admin consent. So keep that in mind as you work. On our Get page of our web application, I'm adding one more button here. So I highlight the code that creates the intent request for a get teams intent. Remember, we're posting some JSON data back to our web application through this method in order to test. That allows us to hit our breakpoints. When I duplicate that button, I can change a few values here, and I'm just letting the JavaScript know that I want the get messages intent. So the JavaScript will send that to the web application via a post request. How do we trigger that JavaScript? Well, here's our get page. I've entered in the API access token, which allows us to access Amazon servers, and the graph access token, which allows us to access the Microsoft Graph servers. Here's our new button at the bottom, the intent request for get messages. And when we fire off that code and send that request to Microsoft Graph, I've created a breakpoint here, and you can see we get back after doing a method called read string as async, a string with a lot of data in it. Some of that is blurred out because it is ID information. And we can continue to parse through this information the same way that we parsed through the teams array. If we look at the JSON visualizer for this data that we get back, you can see that in the Code and Coda team site, we have 9 messages. Within that array, within that array item is our message data. You can see we have values such as created, date and time. What we really want though is the body value for this message. So we continue to drill down through this JSON, and you can see within the body property we have a content type and a content, which is the actual text of the message. And right before we started tonight's show, I submitted one more message to the Code and Coda team site. Now you can see when I rerun this application, I'm getting 10 messages back, and that's because I wanted to send a message to you, the audience. You can see here in the body of the message, thank you for watching Season 1 of Code and Coda. That just about does it. Here we go. 2 weeks. Season 2 starts. We're taking 1 week off between now and the beginning of Season 2. We'll be doing the typical create episode. We'll create our development environment. We'll be creating a new Alexa skill and a new project in Visual Studio. I'm not quite sure what kind of project we'll be creating. I was hoping to get people to discuss what they would like to see during this Teams chat. which we can still try if there are people that want to try that out. But that's it for today's episode. We're going to get started with the Coda real soon. The winners of tonight's pop quiz are Jim and Bob. Congratulations, you tied. You know, I thought about this possibility of a tie. So why don't we have Alexa help us figure out a winner? We're gonna have her flip a coin for us. So Jim, your heads. Bob, your tails. Alexa, flip a coin.
You got heads.
Oh, Jim, you're the winner. Sorry, Bob. It's never tails. Alright, that's it for this episode. Should we try the Teams meeting? I'm gonna put Eric back up on the screen, and I'm gonna crank up this Teams meeting and see if anybody else wants to join in. If not, no big deal. We'll go ahead and get started with that Coda. So hang tight. We're almost done here. You know, I tried to join this Teams meeting a couple times, it wouldn't let me in. But I finally got in, I saw Jim. Jim, thanks for joining, and thanks for everybody else for joining. Looks like the Teams meeting is not gonna happen. We'll try again some other time. What I really wanted to try was Together mode. with Microsoft Teams, which looks like a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed watching today's episode and Season 1. We'll be back again, like I mentioned, in 2 weeks for Season 2 of Code and Coda. Why don't we check out Eric one last time this season. Thanks again for coming. Take care, everybody.